Hello, this is my first music production video. Uh, Thanks for joining me so much. I really appreciate it. Basically, today's topic is how to get your kick and bass working together, so that you can, have a defined kick and a defined bass that sound like separate elements, but also are fitting together in the mix and are cohesive, and specifically can play at the same time, so that the bass note can play at the same time as the kick drum, and they're both clear, and you get that clear. Because I know that I struggled with that a lot when I first started out. And actually, yesterday, one of my students asked me, "So how do you, how do you like?" I showed him. What I do sometimes is I'll do like I'll add a kick drum, or I'll add some elements to someone's track to kind of show them what direction I would take it in. And so he was kind of asking me, how do you make a bass drum and kick, like a bass line and kick drum, work together like that, so that they can happen at the same time? Because he's saying I always have to put my bass line on an offbeat, right? And so I had that same problem when I first started, for sure. Like, I couldn't put a bass tone on the, actually, because I was only making music that had kick drum 1 2 3 4, like that. And so I would never be able to have an emphasis with a bass tone on the on beat ever, because I didn't know how to mix it. So this limit, I mean, like, that's a big problem, because if you actually play bass, like, I'm a bass player, and so I know as a bass player that you often play on the on beat when you're a bass player, right? That's pretty typical as a bass player to play on the on beat. Playing on the off beat is common in disco, and so you can kind of make a type of disco bass line on with you just using the off beats. And yeah, and so you have this whole, like, kind of almost genre, or this whole, like, pantheon or parthenon or whatever of dance music, which is like like that, right? And you have the bass line coming off the kick. And the thing is that it is really easy to make dance music that way. I mean, it's easy to make pumping bass that way. It is so easy. I mean, and sure, I mean, go for it. If that's, I mean, now if you want to have a little more compositional freedom, you'll have to learn how to get the kick and bass working like that. And the thing is that an emphasis with a bass note on the kick is very important to be able to do. It's kind of a fundamental thing in music, and it, putting bass notes only on the offbeat really is contrary to, like, how bass even kind of works. And that's why we have the kick drum, first of all, emphasizing the main syncopation, right, or the main rhythm, which often in many tracks is just quarter notes. And that's fine. Like, I've made thousands of tracks with just a quarter note pulse, and that's totally fine for a kick drum rhythm. It really is. But the bass, shouldn't just be working opposite that. Really, I mean, even if you're making donk, I'm serious. It needs to be more than just, like, only on the offbeat like that. And so you have to learn how to do that. So basically, we'll get into that. So first, you take a well-designed kick. I'll explain how to do that later. Let's listen to that again, okay? So here, listen to that. So that's an 808 kick with a little bit of processing, a little bit of secret sauce, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And now the important thing to understand is that maybe you don't recognize that as an 808, like, as the usually, because people usually think of the long decay 808 as being an 808. Now, 808 is a great drum machine. I've got to tell you, as much as I love Florida, it's a crazy place. I mean, I went to Florida. It was it was just crazy when I went there. Honestly, it was completely insane the whole time. Like, Florida's crazy, and they're crazy enough that they just crank the decay on their 808s all the way to maximum, and just, like, they play entire parties, like, on their 808, but with the decay cranked to maximum. And that's the Miami bass, Florida bass, the origin of trap music, the origin of big bass. People think about that when they think about the 808, because that's what it's really most famous for. But I use an 808 kick in the same way that a 606 kick is kind of, like, used usually, which is to have a short decay. And really, that is essential for designing a good kick. I don't care what anyone says. 808 is cool because it's like a kick bass. It has the the kick, and it has like the deep bass that goes along with it, kind of gives it to you all at once. Now, really, you can do that without an 808. You can do that with, and you can use a more interesting sound than an 808 actually makes too. I mean, 808 sound great. I'm not going to get into an 808 debate here. I use them all the time. 808 rules, obviously. It's like the best drum machine ever, obviously. So, I'm not getting into a debate about it, but you can use a more interesting bass sound that actually, especially, yeah, I mean, has a different flavor and cuts better in different kind of scenarios too, like in terms of a sound design mixing way. Now, I'm not going to talk about how to design a bass sound right now, but let's listen to a bass sound that's cool. So, I don't know or maybe I should point out the bass. Say bass sound. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, if that's kind of goofy, but I mean, but like you hear a sound there, right? So I mean, the trick is to have it like the punchy kick, the short decay kick, right, and then a longer decay bass, which is quieter. That's basically all there is to it. Now, the thing is that you have to mix it right though, because the kick, um first of all, like the kick needs to be really loud. Like, I mean, here's basically how it was explained to me, right? By my friend Dom, who was in he's Neurodriver and Far Too Loud as a shout out, because he really helped me a lot. Not that we're like the same style of music or that you'll even I mean, if you're my friend, maybe he's part of the scene, right? So, but he's a really cool guy. He explained to me basically low pass your kick, your whole track actually, but you can do it with just your kick and bass, and listen to it. And basically, you want to hear the kick punching through the bass at all times. Like, you don't want it to be. I mean, it's simple, right? But you have to listen to it kind of low passed, like at 100 hertz or even 80 hertz or even 60 hertz. Honestly, 70 hertz or whatever. Really low, below, like into the sub bass, and you want the sub bass itself to have a dynamic punch. Okay, so that means there's the kick, and then you can hear the bass line, because the thing is that decay is basically the determining factor in how we hear sounds. Decay is like the biggest aspect. That's a sound design thing that I'm going to get to in other videos. But you know what decay is, I'm hoping. It means how long the sound is, right? And so if you have the longer bass, you're going to hear it because it's still going. Like the kick ends, right? And then the bass is still going. But the way that we hear it is, it sounds like, I mean, it sounds unified when we do it right. So let's give you an example. So here is a little kick bass loop, okay? Okay, so all right. Little kick bass loop. And so it's like you hear there's you change up the decay, but basically, how does that work actually? How did I get it like that? So the kick drum and the bass line both have two parts, okay? They both have the main recording part, which is processed, and how we do the processing. This video is 8 minutes long now, so if you want to learn more about this, like the specifics, talk to me for sure. Absolutely, we can get into that. But basically, the thing is that you have you've got two. Like, the great thing about digital mixers, like DAWs, is that we can have as many channels as we want. Really, you can have like a million channels, so you can actually send your kick to another channel. And why would you do that? Well, it's actually a really good idea in a mathematical way. And I mean, if you want to get into the math part, maybe you should go to school for that actually. But what I know from experience is that when you send to another channel, just send the track to another channel, you have to make sure there's no delays or phasing issues. It's a little bit challenging if you're not so good with your timings and stuff. But basically, you would filter the bass out of it. You would put a high pass filter on the second version of the kick drum, and also on the second version of the bass line. Okay, so we're almost at the end of this video here. So here's the thing, is you have different filter points. Like, you can't use a standard filter. It depends on the content of the bass line and the kick, right? You take a certain frequencies from it. Like, often I'll take 150 hertz up from the kick. Like, I'll high pass it at 150 hertz, and it's a slow slope. So you actually get down to about 70 hertz in there, a little bit of presence. And so you're adding like 70 hertz on a slope, 50 hertz, and this is how the slope works. And so you okay. Talk to me. Talk to me.